Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. Part 3. Now one might object that the clergy in Ptolemaic times were quite independent, and their financial independence did not necessarily require direct commission from the ruling house. The completion of the Edfu temple and the immediately subsequent start of construction in Dendera clearly show an active construction policy controlled from above. There may be several reasons for this. Firstly, the Hathor temple was cultically connected to the Horus temple of Edfu, so the construction project in Dendera in the successor to Edfu makes perfect sense. Second, Cleopatra referred to herself as Theophilopator, a father-loving goddess. It was therefore obvious to follow Ptolemy XII's building program. To continue. Thirdly, the choice of a Hathor sanctuary may also be directly traceable to Cleopatra herself, because with Hathor or Isis identified the female line of the Ptolemies. This alignment finds a pictorial reflection in a colossal representation of Cleopatra Hathor on the back wall of the Temple of Dendera. This could therefore be seen in a broader sense, as the Temple of Cleopatra, which was also intended to preserve the dynasty through the presentation of Caesarion, the common son of Caesar and Cleopatra. 38. Another argument for this thesis is the fact that the Temple of Hathor probably directly after Octavian's entry into Alexandria on August 19, 30 BC. If one assumes that Cleopatra probably committed suicide around August 10, a connection between the two events can hardly be denied. The Hathor temple in Dendera is the house of the new goddess Cleopatra Hathor. Also unusual is the complete absence of her husband, Ptolemy XIII, from the monuments. Instead, Cleopatra is present on the temple walls, first with her father, then alone and later with her son Caesarion. There is no doubt, according to the monuments, Cleopatra had been there since 51 BC. In 200 BC she was practically sole ruler, which led to heated arguments with her brother and husband, which Caesar, as is well known, settled in her favor. In her monument, she presented herself as an Egyptian, unlike her famous predecessor Arsinoe II, and even more than all the Ptolemies before her. What is particularly striking is the almost complete lack of archaeological evidence. The remains in Greek style, apart from the coins or the famous head in Berlin in contrast, the new building in Dendera and later, the birthplace Mamesi in Armant, with which the pharaoh integrated Caesarion's birth into the Egyptian cult, impressively show how Cleopatra continued the local tradition despite her Greek roots. The Ptolemaic woman obviously supported the Egyptian religion, which also included the animal cult. What was that all about? While the ritual burial of animals was still rare in the New Kingdom, over 100 cemeteries with millions of mummified animals were created in the early Ptolemaic period, the largest of them near Memphis Saqqara, in Lower Egypt and near Hermopolis Tuna el Jebel. Middle Egypt are still from 29 BC. BC for the Bukis bull by Armant testifies to Cleopatra's connection to this tradition, as the text states that Cleopatra V in the first year of her reign on March 22, 51 BC. He personally took part in the enthronement of the holy bull. There are two main functions associated with animal burials, the oracle being and a magical ritual in the sense of a regeneration cycle. The latter in particular shows that the animal cults have broken away from the original royal cult and have now even taken on a central function of the king by expanding the boundaries of overcoming this world and the hereafter and ensuring the constant renewal of the world, as M. Phitzenreter emphasizes. Of course, the conceptual role of the king remains and efforts were made, especially under the Ptolemies, to firmly involve the pharaoh in the local cult centers. But now it is the royal Greek side that uses monumental expressions of local temple cults, and not the other way around. The Ptolemaic and later Roman administration, which was intensively involved in the now monumentally presented animal cults in temples and on animal necropolises, was no longer the trigger for cultural monumentalization, but rather its beneficiaries. 48 meters Phitzenreter thus describes the expansion of animal necropolises triggered by the late period rulers, which were then expanded on a large scale under the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies were not the initiators of animal burials, but they used this ritual for their own purposes. Jaisman expressed himself similarly. They see the Egyptians of the late period no longer need the king as a living embodiment of divine rulership and as an incorporation specimen of the god Horus. These functions of a living realization of the divine are now performed by sacred animals. Consequently, the pharaoh passes on sacred functions to the animals, so the office shows tendencies towards secularization. By transferring the pharaoh's exclusive ritual and secular tasks to non-royal dignitaries as well as transferring the pharaoh's ritual role as a living representation of the divine to animal gods, Pharaoh's withdrawal from the original fullness of meaning was already undertaken in the late period. These developments, in the sense of demotization and secularization of the office of pharaoh, can be directly linked to the foreign rulers who ruled the country during this time. Until now, what was important for understanding Egyptian identity was the demarcation against foreigners, but the non-Egyptian elements in society are becoming increasingly stronger due to foreign rule, but also foreign traders, mercenaries and craftsmen. The changes in the pharaoh's concept primarily served this purpose: integration of the foreign ruler. In this way, models were created into which the Ptolemies could fit themselves. The transfer of pharaoh's central sacral functions to the animals also had other pleasant consequences, because in a certain way the animal cult made it possible for the ruling couple Cleopatra and Ptolemy to stay in distant Rome for almost 2 years. There, however, the animal cult was met with great incomprehension. This is how Cicero polemicized in BC. The very year that Cleopatra was in Rome, the Syrians worship fish, the Egyptians sacrifice almost every kind of animal, and the Greeks even consider people to be gods.